listening to The Tenderness Revolution, a podcast about the stories of kindness, compassion, and empathy that play out in our lives, because these deeply moving experiences describe what it means to be human and invite us into a new way of thinking about the world and each other. I'm your host, writer and journalist Yvonne Gavin. And every episode, I'll be asking a new interviewee about a pivotal moment of tenderness that helped shape the course of their life. Today's conversation is with the British ultramarathon runner, Allie Bailey. Hailed as an inspirational female adventurer by the Guardian newspaper, Allie really does test herself to the absolute limit, and has completed some insanely long and difficult challenges. She's run 100 miles across the frozen Lake Kosciuszko in Mongolia, crossed Namibia 3 times, and run from coast to coast in Panama and in Malta. She's always working towards some sort of amazing goal. So when I recently emailed her, she said that she was sorry for not responding, but she'd been busy running 1,000 miles across the entire length of the UK. Yeah, that's the equivalent of 42 marathons. I realised that Allie is not someone who does things by halves. And when you hear her in this interview, you'll know what I mean. She's got an incredible amount of energy. But Allie is also highly relatable, as she's extremely open and honest about the personal challenges that she's faced, discussing how she got through a seismic mental breakdown in 2021 and what it was like being an extremely fit ultra runner who was also a functioning alcoholic. I think it's this honesty combined with her fantastic sense of humour that makes her such a good running coach, particularly for women. She really believes that absolutely anyone can run a marathon. Anyone. And I love the way that she talks about limitations as being all in our head. It's so refreshing. So check her out on Instagram or visit her website where you can sign up for coaching, because Allie really is a very inspiring person. And if there's one thing I hope this conversation brings you, it's a sense of being able to feel differently about what you can achieve in your life. If you'd like more information about this episode, including links to Allie's Instagram and website, you can sign up to receive our newsletter that includes some other bits and pieces, such as background info about the guest and our tenderness thought for the week. If you'd like to be added, just sign up via the link in our Instagram bio or go to our website. And if this episode resonates with you, it would really mean so much if you were able to share it with a friend that you think would really benefit from listening to. And if you feel like leaving a little review on Apple Podcasts, that really is the best way to spread this word and grow this idea of tenderness. You can always email us or message us via Instagram or Facebook. We always love hearing from you. Any support that you can give us in this venture would mean so much. So please do listen to this episode. I really hope that you enjoy it. I'm so excited to be talking to the lovely Allie Bailey on the podcast today. Welcome, Allie.
Hello, it's lovely to meet you on the Zooms.
It is. It's lovely to meet you. I'm really looking forward to talking to you about all things running and how it's possible to sort of do that from a place of tenderness, because the things that you do are quite astounding. And I'm really fascinated to get an insight into sort of what drives you and where you kind of have your reserves. So I'm really looking forward to that. But before we do our chat, I want to start off by asking you to share your moment of tenderness with us, because the idea behind the Tenderness Revolution podcast is that essentially our lives are made up of all these little stories stitched together.
And when we shine a light on scenes where we felt a profound sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves, moments where we felt seen or understood, or that we had a deeper relationship to the world around us, it's as though we're awakened to greater meaning and purpose. So, Ali, please do share your moment with us.
I actually have a couple because I found this really, really hard, mainly because when I thought about them, it made me feel quite upset. So I have a dog and her name is Pickle, and she is the love of my life. And she's what dog psychologists would call, what do they call it? They say that they have something other in the home, like advantages in the home or something like that. She does. She sleeps in my bed. And every morning when I wake up, she is there and she crawls up the bed and she looks me directly in the eye. And I am just super happy. Like I just look at her and it's ridiculous. And it's weird because I haven't had that happiness. I've never really felt it. And even now I'm like, oh, what's that feeling? Oh my God, that's a weird feeling. But like that is every day. It's just that moment of a little face crawling up the bed and being like, morning, mummy. And that's the one I thought of that didn't make me cry. But the one that I thought that did make me cry was about 10 months ago. I had an extreme mental breakdown. It was awful. And I was taken in a car from Yorkshire to Somerset, taken home because no one knew what to do with me. And they were going to take me back to my mum's. I'm a 40-year-old woman, but I was like, I don't want to go to my mum's. I want to go to my friend Julius's. Julius is my ex-boyfriend. He's my best mate. And I called him and I said, this is really bad. I need to come to yours. And he dropped everything and he waited at home for me to the day of work. And when he opened the door, he just cuddled me. And it was just so lovely. See, I'm going to cry even talking about it because he didn't have to do that. He could have been like, I'm busy, or go to your mum's or whatever. But he like took me back into his house and basically just looked after me for like 3 days. I just slept for 3 days. He was so kind to me. And you know, like I said, he didn't have to do that. And that's the one that really stands out to me. Because I think that was one of those moments where I was like, people might actually love you, Ali. Like people might actually have unconditional love for you. So I have Pickle's little face every morning, being super cute, and like the connection I have with that dog is ridiculous. But then that was one that really, really stood out to me and has made me cry. So in the first 4 minutes of this, you've made me cry. Brilliant.
Oh, I think you've almost made me cry. Wow. Firstly, with the dog, we've spoken about dogs on the podcast. Actually, there's a guest, Mark Nepo, who's an amazing best-selling author, spiritual writer and poet. And he spoke about his relationship with his dog. I've had a dog for about 3 years and I really, really get it. There's a soul connection. Like you can have that. And I think it sounds really strange, but I often feel surprised that my dog can't speak.
Oh, your dog can speak. You just can't hear it. I do Pickle's voice all the time, but Pickle mainly says things that I want to say. So, but there's a really good book called Your Dog is Your Mirror. I can't remember who wrote it. I'm reading it at the moment. It's quite hard going, but it talks about this connection we have with our dogs. And sometimes I think I'm mad. And sometimes I'm like, if people could see this, would they think I'm weird? Like I'm like married to this dog. But it is such a special relationship. It's an unconditional relationship, like 100%. I mean, you feed them and they love it. But even if you don't feed them, they still absolutely know everything. Like the energy exchange between you and the dog is a thing. And I just, oh man, when I see a little face in the mornings, I'm just like, everything's gonna be all right. She's absolutely adorable.
I think it's energy, actually. That's what it is. They have an energy, they pick up on your energy, and it's something you can't articulate, you can't really understand until you've experienced it. So yeah.
No, and this book talks about that. Like it talks about how dogs don't think, they feel. Like they don't think thoughts, they feel feelings. So that energy exchange, if you're feeling anxious, your dog is like, what is that energy? It's how they, it's how they hunt, it's how they know they're in a dangerous situation. So it's brilliant because it's really made me think about how I feel and how when I'm anxious or if I'm upset about something or if I'm not dealing with something, that's not just having an effect on me, it's having an effect on Pickle. And it just really helps me calm down. And, you know, now I block time in my diary every day to spend an hour or 2 hours with Pickle watching TV or chilling out or just holding her little face and talking to her, because she deserves that. She deserves that calm energy. And I get so much back from her that, you know, it's just amazing. But yeah, it's a really great book, especially when you're trying to understand how they behave. Because even when I don't know I'm feeling anxious or worried, she does. And she behaves like in accordance with it. Like if I see another dog coming up the road, I think she's going to go for it. I get all like, oh, before she's even seen the dog. And she's like, right. And she will go for it because she's like, oh, mummy's scared. I need to do something. So yeah, those moments with Pickle, man, like I just can't explain to people. It's lovely to meet someone that understands the dog thing, because sometimes people look at me like I'm quite odd. But even when I'm out running, the dog's on the trails. It's the reason I never win anything. I'm like, oh my God, a trail angel. And I'm magnetized towards it. And more often than not, it is like, hello. And I'm like, yes, hello. Because they just know dog people. They're amazing.
Definitely. It's interesting, that book. I think it explains that feeling that I have, that the dog can pick up on what's going on, and obviously it actually is. So
yeah, it's the thing.
Well, thank you for sharing with us as well your experience of, you know, your difficulty that you had, emotional, sort of mental, sort of difficult period that you went through. Yeah, and how amazing to really feel completely accepted and loved during that time. Those experiences are just so healing, and well, it's what helps us as humans to stay, you know, connected and really, I think, provide that sense of hope and optimism that we all need, you know, to keep going. I don't even know if
it's like hope and optimism or anything like that. I think it's just, it's the basic human instinct. Yeah. It's, you know, but when you get into a state like that, and I'd been in that state for a long, long time, and someone is unconditional in their like acceptance of what you need, it's almost it's a relief. Like there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not a terrible person. Like you know, at that point I was in like anhedonia, which is the state you get into where you don't care about anything. So when they opened the door to the house, my dog was living with him at the time, and I saw her. And usually when I see my dog, I'm like, oh my God, baby pie, and I'm all over her. But I looked at her and I felt nothing. I just felt nothing. And the fact that, you know, I remember it so clearly, and I really struggled to remember any other times. And I'm sure there are thousands of times. I could tell you about thousands of races where I've had moments with people, or events where I've had moments with people who've been in bits, and I've managed to pull them out. And I could feel like, oh, there was this time when I helped this person in the desert, or this time when this happened here. But I didn't remember them because that one was so important. That moment was so important to me. It was like a huge relief of, right, I'm safe, I'm home, and I can kind of start to heal myself. And so, yeah, that was a real standout to me. And I don't know if he actually knows that. I see him like every few days, but I don't know if I actually told him that. I think I have. I'll make sure that I get him to listen to this, and then he'll know. He'll
listen, and then he'll really fully appreciate what it means to you.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start off by asking you about your background before you really got into running. So you spent 12 years in the music industry, working for major record labels. Can you tell me about when you realised that the thing that you'd absolutely loved, which was music, was slowly killing you? That's how you described it.
Yeah, that's exactly how it was. So I'm writing my book at the moment, and writing a book is really hard. It is really hard. But writing this book is so hard because I'm struggling to get past this block of, I went and did this job that I wanted to do since I was 14, and it just broke me into a million bits. Because even now, with like the knowledge I have about how people can be coercively controlled and how people can be, for want of a better word, kind of brainwashed into a certain type of behaviour, I still think it was all my fault. I still think I wasn't good enough. And I still think that if I had been a stronger, in inverted commas, person, then maybe I would have got through it. But I started working in the music industry when I was 27, and it took me 7 years of applying for jobs to get this job. So I'd applied to every major label. I tried everything. And eventually I got a job working as a PA at a really big label. And the first couple of years were like any sort of a new relationship with something that you love. It's like, oh my God, you're amazing. This is great. I'm having the best time. But slowly stuff started to become apparent about the way that that industry is run and the way that people behave within it. That a tiny voice in me was saying, this isn't right. But I was like, no, this is how it is. This is how it is. This is the music industry. You need to harden up. You need to accept it. And the other thing is, we were told all the time, I say we, I mean, my colleagues, the younger kids who worked in it, the newbies, everybody was told how lucky they were to be there. So it was never, you know, we're lucky to have you because you've got all these skills and you're great. It was, you are lucky to be here. So anything that was raised, anything that happened, it's like, remember, you're lucky to be here. Remember that everybody wants your job. Remember, people kill for your job. So you just got on with it like it was normal. And there was a lot of bullying. There was a lot of sexism, so much sexism. There was misogyny. There was abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse. And every time something happened that was bad, you were just lucky to be there. So you didn't, no one ever said anything. There were people that you were scared of. It's kind of exactly how you imagine it to be. If you kind of watch a film like Kill Your Friends or something like that, it is like that. It's frightening. And you're so terrified of losing your job or so terrified of being found out to push at your job that you just go along with it. And I medicated with alcohol because you can in music. People always drinking all the time. I'm lucky I never took drugs. If I took drugs, I'd probably be dead by now. But, I kept trying to be like, it'll get better. You'll harden up. It'll be all right. You learn who to not cross. You learn who to not talk to. You learn who to avoid. You learn how to behave. You learn to keep your head down. But it was awful, really bad. And eventually, I never really changed anything. I just thought it would be okay. So I just kept doing what I was doing, changed labels a couple of times. But it's endemic in any creative industry to be told that you're lucky to be doing something, but really you're being underpaid, taken advantage of. And that's how those industries can work. And they are so heavily male that even if you behave in the same way as your male counterparts, you are treated very differently. They use words like you're a liability, you're emotional, you're overly emotional, you're bossy. It was always just how the females were described. And yeah, it got to the point where I was extremely ill a couple of times, but I just kept going. I'd take a few weeks off drinking. I'd take a little holiday. I'd come back. I wouldn't actually change anything, but I'd expect a different outcome. It'll be better this time. This label will be different. These people will be different, but they won't. It's an industry where everyone knows each other and it's always the same thing. And, so on one side of it, there's the side of me that's like, you weren't hard enough for it. You failed. And on the other side, there's look, you saw what was going on and you did the best thing you could do, which was to get out of it. But it took me a real long time to get out of it.
It can be to see it objectively for what it is when you're in it. And
it was a cult. It was a cult. It is a cult.
That you're lucky to be here, and there's like 100 other people that would jump at the chance of your job. They're so controlling and damaging, and there are a few industries. Journalism is also quite similar, and it's very unhealthy to be subjected to those kinds of beliefs, and it's a very difficult place to be. So it sounds like you really did the right thing by realizing that it wasn't good for you.
I did, but it wasn't a light bulb moment. There was no, oh, hang on a minute, this is awful, I'm going to get out. It was a real gradual thing. And the damage that it had, sorry, go on.
I mean, what made you get into running? Were you running through that time, or did you decide to take up running and then did it change everything?
People always ask this. The thing I say to them is that running won't save your life, but it will buy you time. And I first started running. So I suffered from depression probably from the age of 16, but it was like the 90s, and like you weren't depressed, you were just a teenager. And, lots of stuff happened with my family, and I had this whole "you're not good enough" thing, this story that I started writing when I was 11 about not being good enough, that just rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled into music, being told I wasn't good enough. I was lucky, not good. And I got very depressed, and I would use alcohol as a mechanism to control that depression, in that it would shut it up for 2.5 hours. But then ultimately the next day it's even worse, because you've got the anxiety, and so you just start doing it again, and on it goes for 25 years. So I tried everything. I tried drugs, I tried all that stuff. I remember a doctor suggesting I get exercise, and I hadn't done exercise since school. And I remember going for a run from my little flat in Whitechapel just to see what would happen, and I actually felt for about an hour better. I felt like I wasn't thinking about topping myself, so I was thinking about breathing. And it was horrible, but it sort of went on from there. And then when I started working in music, there were a couple of people I worked with who ran, so I just started doing short distances with them at lunchtimes. And it did make me feel better, like genuinely did. And then I did what everyone does, which is, your first London Marathon. I've seen it happen. Like, I did it for charity, and it sort of spiraled from there, from me not getting the time I wanted at the marathon, which was completely arbitrary, that I picked out of a magazine. Like, that looks like a good time, I'll do that. And I just started, I did the marathon like 6 years in a row, but I didn't do anything in between. I sort of just trained a bit. But as I went from road running, from marathon running, my sister lived in Dorset, that's where I'm from, and she said, "Oh, why don't you come and do a couple of trail runs?" And I was like, "What's a trail run?" And she's like, "Oh, it's like not on a road." And I went along to a couple of these, and I met these people that were so lovely and so encouraging and welcoming and kind. And I'd not experienced that because I was living in London working in music. All I experienced was, how much money do you earn? How many records have you sold? How many famous people do you know? What can you do for me? Yeah. It's all about this imaginary world that you kind of inhabit. But these people on these runs didn't want to know any of that. They were just wanted to run. And it was like the same, the reason I love music is a shared community. So going to Glastonbury and like seeing, and everyone's there for the same thing, and there's no arguments, there's no politics, there's none of that. Everyone is singing along to Coldplay, even if they don't like Coldplay. And that's amazing. Trail running was the same. We're just there for one reason. And I felt this like acceptance, and I just loved it. And I loved the fact that you didn't have to get time, and you didn't have to, it wasn't on a road, and there was obstacles in the way, like trees and roots, and you were seeing parts of the country you hadn't seen before. And it really kind of calmed me down. I was still working in music. I was still drinking way too much, and I was still an absolute mess. But when I was running, I was all right. So that's why I started running more, basically.
Yeah, it sounds like it was like a respite for you. It was like a sort of a pause, and it's a place where you reconnected with yourself, and then there was this community aspect to it too. So I can understand why you were drawn into it, and you wanted to keep doing it, and you wanted to keep doing more and more. Yeah. But to do marathons so quickly, I mean, did you just find it easy? Did running come easily to you? Did long distances come easily to you, or were you just quite competitive?
I'm absolutely the least competitive person in the world. The only person that I'm competitive with is me, and I'm horribly competitive with me because I have this "you're not enough" story. And no, it doesn't come easy. And one of the things that kind of gets my goat a bit is that nowadays people are like, "Oh, that's easy for you." And I'm like, it's honestly not. There are mornings where I wake up and in fact, every morning I wake up and don't want to run. I don't leap out of bed. That's an Instagram lie. People don't leap out of bed into their trainers and do a stretch and run out the door. They're like, "Oh my God, I really don't want to go running today." You have to motivate yourself. But I believe people that have gone through, mental health struggles or just struggles in life are better at motivating themselves than people that haven't, because pain. And like that sometimes you have to do things that you might think you don't want to do to push yourself to feel the next kind of level of contentment or happiness. It's such a weird thing.
I know. I get that. I really do. I think it's like that sense of when you've known suffering and then you've come through it, you're able to actually apply that kind of growth in other areas of your life, and maybe you're not so afraid of the suffering, and you recognize it and you think, right, okay, we can do this, rather than,
and you're grateful. You are grateful. You're grateful for when you don't feel it. And that's a really big thing for me. And the first 6 marathons I ran, I did it because I just wanted to get a better times for myself. But I basically started to enjoy it. It's such a strange thing, running, because people are like, I love running. And I do. I love running. I credit running with everything that it's brought me in my life, but I don't like it. Of course I don't like it. Who likes having to run 50 miles a week or having to get out even when it's raining and cold? Like, I don't like it, but I absolutely love it. And I know I have to do it. Like, I haven't run today, and I didn't run yesterday because I'm on a sort of taper for this big event. I feel awful today. Awful. I'm going out later this afternoon with my friend Julius, the guy who helped me with that back when I wasn't well. But I'm like itching to go out now, but I can't, because I'm on this taper. And I'm like, you can't just run 10 miles a day when you're supposed to not be. It's a bit of a battle, but I kind of enjoy that feeling of, God, you feel awful because you haven't run, because it reminds me that you have to get out and do it. And going those longer distances, I went from marathons to ultras pretty quickly. And when I got involved with ultras, that was it. It was like, I think I ran like, one year I ran like 46 ultras in a year. Like, every weekend I was out doing it, because it was an escape.
Why the long distances? What drove you to try them, and how do they feel different?
So what drove me to try them was my sister, again, was like, oh man, there's this ultra marathon. And I'm like, what's an ultra marathon? And she's like, it's just like longer than a marathon. And this particular one was 36 miles. And I just thought, I wonder if I can do it. I literally just thought, I wonder if I can do that. Might as well give it a go. That was it. It wasn't anything more than that. And I did it. And it was fun. I loved it. But the end of it was horrible, because it was a massive hill. But the whole way through, I was like, can I do this? Do you think I could do this? When I finished it, it's like when I finished my first marathon, I was like, oh my God, like, you've done something amazing. And I spent so many years telling myself I wasn't enough. And I spent so many years, even when I've achieved amazing things, had #1 singles, #1 albums, whatever it was, I've been then asked, yeah, but why didn't you sell 100,000 copies? It's like, you sold 98,000. Why didn't you sell 100,000? Yeah, but why isn't it #1 on all the iTunes charts? But why isn't it this good? And it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, because I would always seek out the negative in everything. So I would end up messing up relationships, messing up work, messing up friendships. And that constant questioning of my own self-worth by myself is agonizing and painful. And the only way to escape it was running or drinking. And I was better at drinking, like much better at drinking. And drinking was always available, and drinking was everywhere, and everybody was drinking. But when I ran, I could get out of my own head. But that would only last while I was running, which is why I say it bought me time, because it bought me the time to think. And believe me, I've run a lot of ultras, a lot of 100-milers, and a lot of multi-days. And I've been in places with no phone reception and no ability to contact people. And that's bought me the silence to come face to face with myself. And you don't have that now. You can never... I don't believe that people have the ability to come face to face with themselves in modern society with phones, iPads, internet, Alexa, your family, your job, your friends. Even when you're going to bed, if you're worried about something, you will distract yourself with a mindfulness app where you're listening to somebody else's voice telling you what to think. You're not actually like clawing into yourself and being like, what is going on here that you feel the need to tell yourself these awful things?
That's true.
You get that. You get that when you're out on a trail. You get that on the Southwest Coast Path in the middle of the night. You get that in a jungle in Panama. You get it in a desert in Namibia, because you are alone and there is no one to help you. So you have to help yourself. And it's painful and it's horrible and it rips you to bits. It strips you down to like the bare bones of who you are. But it's so important. It's so important to do. And that's why I think everyone should do it, basically. Everyone should do something that frightens them.
Yes, I so agree. For the people who aren't really very, very knowledgeable about running for the listeners who don't really understand what ultra marathons are. Tell us, what is an ultra marathon? How long is it? Do you have any breaks? How does it work?
So generally, I love this because usually I do running podcasts. So I'm just like, oh, this is normal. This is normal. It's not normal. So an ultra marathon, a marathon is 26.2 miles. A marathon is a distance, not a pace. It's a distance. So every marathon will be 26.2 miles. An ultra is anything over that distance. But generally in the running world, people turn their noses up at anything under 30 miles. So usually it's 30 miles plus. And the most popular distances will be 50K, which is, I don't know why they do it in K. It's 50K and 100K, which is 34 miles or 36 miles and 62 miles.
Wow.
50 miles and 100 miles. And those are the most common ultras that you get under the big four. Then you get multi-day ultras, which will be like 30 miles a day for 3 days, or famous ones like Marathon des Sables, which is 5 days across the Moroccan desert. And then you get huge, great, massive, famous ones like UTMB out in Switzerland. There's the Barkley Marathons, I'm sure lots of people are aware of, the fabled Barkley Marathons, only 15 finishes. But yeah, my general area of expertise, the stuff I really like is the 50 milers, the 100 milers, and then the multi-days. I love the multi-days.
And with the 50 mile, I mean, am I being stupid here? That's not without stopping?
So 50 miles tends to be a non-stop race, and they say non-stop in that you're not going to go to sleep, but you can have a break. They usually have a time limit on them for safety reasons. So I think Centurion are my favourite race company. If anyone's interested in looking at ultras, Centurion Running do the best for beginners. Their 50 milers have a 15-hour time limit, so you need to be able to complete 50 miles in 15 hours, and that is a safety precaution for the course, which means you're not running alone at night. They can fully support you. You have aid stations. They call them aid stations. Some people call them checkpoints. Every kind of, depending on the length of the race and depending on the difficulty of the race. Centurion do it about every sort of 8 to 10 miles. So every 8 to 10 miles, you'll come across a table with loads of food and drink, and you'll just eat a load of food and drink some delicious drinks and go on. You carry the majority of your stuff with you. You carry water, you carry your snacks, you carry your first aid kit and all that stuff. So you wear a little bag. But you get various levels of difficulty. So, you've got your Centurion introductory 50 miler, but then you've got like the Dragon's Back race, which is 6 days, 12,000 foot of elevation, right down the back of the middle of Wales. That is like the toughest mountain race on earth. Like everything, there are levels to it. I would, if you want to compare it to football, it's like the Premiership versus your local team, and everything in between. You can choose what you do. So yeah, that's kind of the lowdown on what it is.
So you have done a lot. You've done a lot of these, and they sound like completely extreme and crazy to me. So there was the Lake Kovskol in Mongolia. So that's running across ice.
Yeah, so Lake Kovskol is a lake in Mongolia, and it is the biggest lake in Mongolia. It's 100 miles long, and in the summer it's all lovely and lakey, and in the winter it's minus 42 and frozen and about a metre thick. So we went out, I was working for a company called Rat Race, and we went out to test whether or not it was possible to run from one end to the other across 4 days and camp on the edge of the lake at night. Because we wanted to put it on as an event for people. So we did. And it was very cold. And they do loads of events like that. And I've tested a lot of their events for things like that. And that's a really extreme end of it. That's like a very extreme end of it. You can go and book into a 50 miler anywhere in the UK, anywhere, be fully supported, and it'll be fine.
Wow. Amazing. It's out there
it's this mental world. But when you're in that world, like when you're in the music industry, you think it's normal. So you're like, yeah, just go crack off a 50 mile. Like, on Friday I'm doing the Yorkshire Three Peaks for the 4th time this year, because I'm like, yeah, it's just the Yorkshire Three Peaks. But the thing that we have to remember, and I have to remember, is the Yorkshire Three Peaks for some people is a bucket list, once in a lifetime thing. But I go up there and train on it because it's local and I'm used to it. So it's not, this is the thing, it's not that ultra runners are better than anyone else or marathon runners are better than anyone else. It's just that's what they've chosen as their as their speciality. And it's like anything, you practice really hard, or you practice not really hard. You embed it into your life, and it becomes normal, really, really normal. And that's kind of what it's become to me. Like I say, there are these extreme things you can go and do. There's loads of those, but there's also the nice ones, the cuddly ones.
Interesting that it feels that way for you. So you've also crossed the Namib Desert twice. You're the first woman to run the full length of the Panama Canal, and you've the length of the Outer Hebrides, and well, there's loads of other events. But it sounds like what you're always doing is you're pushing yourself to your limits. And the thing that comes up for me when I look at these events is trust. So I imagine that you must have a deep sense of trust in something, in your body or in the universe for supporting you in these endeavors, or I don't know. I just wonder, what part does trust play for you in the undertaking of these incredible challenges?
I don't know if it plays any. I've never thought about it like that before. I've really never thought about it like that before. Really, I think there was definitely an element of pushing yourself to as far as you can go. Like, where is the edge? And like, I found the edge for me in January when I went and ran the Arc of Attrition, which is the hardest 100 in the UK. It runs from Cowes, where is it? It runs from the bottom of Cornwall all the way down past the Lizard, over Land's End, and then up back to Portreath. It's awful because it's the 28th of January. So it's dark, it's cold. You start at 12 o'clock midday. So you've got 4 hours of daylight, then you go into the dark, and it takes a long time, and it's gnarly and cold and windy and wet.
Awful.
Yeah, and it's right on the edge of it's on the southwest coast path, so it's right on the edge. And I had trained so hard for it, and I got to mile 75 and I was throwing up food out of both ends. I was so exhausted, and I pulled and I DNF'd, so I did not finish. I just was like, I can't do this anymore.
Mile 75.
It wasn't
Wow.
Yeah, mile 75. It wasn't a mental problem. It was a physical problem, and it was awful. But I'll come back to that in a bit. So like, that was my limit at that time. But I've done stuff before where I haven't had the option to get out. So when I was in Panama, across Panama on foot, and we stayed in the jungle, and it was the most terrifying experience of my life, but the most exhilarating, in that's one of the places I came face to face with Allie Bailey, like literally like looking in a mirror and seeing who, I keep wanting to swear, I'm trying not to swear, but seeing who you really are. Like, because you face yourself down. You're tired, you're hungry, you don't have any alcohol or drugs or anything to balance it out. You've got other people, but they're in their zone. You've got a few other people. And so you have to deal with you, and you can't get out of that situation. And I think the pain, the mental pain, and all the awful stuff that, like, the depression and the stuff that makes me depressed has brought me. It's almost like I am going in to battle with that. And it's like, you will not stop me doing this. And you're saying it yourself. You're like, you will not stop me doing this, Allie. You won't. And because, and coming out of the end of it, and whether you've DNF'd or whether you've done it, you've had this experience which has actually been 100%, we've been present, you've been 100% present in what you are doing and 100% present in your own life. You haven't been living it through a YouTube video or TikTok or Instagram. You've been living it in your life, and you learn so much more about your capabilities, and not just in running, but in life. You know, I have very, very strict boundaries now, and running has brought me that. It's like, I don't accept these things. I'm not going to accept that, but that's not for me. I'm going to say no to more stuff, and I'm going to say yes to more things that I know will kind of enrich my life. It sounds really, really hippy dippy, but going back to your question about trusting, I guess there's an element of trust in yourself, because you have to trust that you will deal with the outcome, whatever the outcome is. And sometimes the outcome is not rosy. Sometimes you don't walk away with a big shiny buckle and a bottle of whatever. Sometimes you finish a race. I have finished races before, big, long 100-milers, where I've basically got to the end and just been like, that was awful. You're rubbish. That time was terrible. You should have done better. And it's like, you've just run 100 miles, Allie. Like, you've just run 100 miles, but still because of the negative bias everybody on earth suffers with, all you can do is pick holes in the bad stuff. But you take that and then you go home with it and you take it to pieces and you go, why was I thinking that? And I was thinking that because in my life experience, I've constantly been told I'm not enough. So I'm now telling myself I'm not enough. I'm telling myself that wasn't good enough, when actually it completely was. So it helps me to rewrite the story. And the old story was so diabolical. I was so horrible to myself. I still am. The old story will never go away. The Old Testament, I like to call it. It's there. It's huge. But the new story is tiny and it's being written. Every time I revisit the old one, it's like, I'm going to cross that bit out and I'm going to rewrite it like this. And that's how I see the ultra running. It's like, it's always a different experience. I could do the same race 4 years in a row, always a different experience because of British weather. In a marathon, you got 4 or 5 hours, 6, 7 maybe hours of weather in England on a road. In an ultra marathon, you can have between 24 and 38 and 100 hours of weather on a trail you've never been on that has its own weather system with other weird people, and you spend a lot of that time by yourself. Whereas in a road marathon, you've got thousands of people. On a trail marathon or ultra, you don't. You're alone. And that is such an important thing for people to experience. Being alone, facing yourself down, being really honest with yourself. And ultimately, what comes out of all that, which I think is relevant to this podcast, is self-care and recognition that you are enough and recognition that you're incredible and you're going to look after yourself. And that's when I DNF'd that race back in January. I was like, this is really embarrassing. Everyone knows I'm taking part. They've seeded me as one of the people to come top 3. Everyone's going to think I'm a failure. I came out of it and I was just like, you are an embarrassment, Allie. But when I get those feelings, I literally physically out loud now go, stop, put my little hands up, like, stop. And I'm like, you just ran 75 miles on the Southwest Coast Path in the middle of winter in a race that has a 70% non-finisher rate. You did okay. Lots of people fail on their first go. Did you learn something? And what I learned was me stopping was actually the ultimate act of self-care. And all the stuff I taught myself over the past 10 months after my big breakdown about being kind to yourself, I put into practice in saying, I've had enough, I'm going to stop. Like, I'm just going to stop and I'm going to go home and I'm going to work out what went wrong. It was the ultimate act of self-care. It was not a failure. It was me saying, you've done enough now, Allie. You can stop. And I've never been like that before. It's only through running that I've discovered this, like, it's okay to be nice to yourself. The nicer you are to yourself, the more often you can go running. So it works like that.
Really interesting part of it. And I'm really fascinated by, with these kinds of challenges. I mean, even like a marathon, I mean, you're talking about ultra marathons, which are like a number of marathons all kind of, run, one after the other. And I can't even imagine being able to run a whole marathon. But I often wonder, like, what is that enables somebody to go into a challenge like that and actually, see it through? Is it a sort of a letting go? Is it like a tenderness, or is it a pushing energy? And I think what you just described there, where you allowed yourself to stop, where you really listened to what your body was telling you, that's definitely a tenderness. But I'm wondering if there is a sort of an allowing in the pushing through as well, if you see what I mean. So I'm wondering if you ever get to a point where your mind is telling you that you can't carry on, but you can. It's just a story that your mind has, and how you differentiate between that and really knowing that it's time to stop.
When I first started running ultras, I was very ill, still very ill. I'd had a couple of really severe mental breakdowns, but it's like I said, I changed nothing. I still was doing the job. I still was drinking too much. I still was like, it's because of this. It's because of this. It's because of where I live. Or it's because of my boyfriend. Or it's like, no, Ali, it's because of you. It's because of the stories you're telling yourself. But I didn't know that at the time. So my first 100 miler, I did it back of a very severe borderline psychiatric breakdown. And my reason for that was basically, F you, brain, you are not going to win. I'm going to show you I'm talking to myself here. I'm going to show you that you can run 100 miles. And Jesus Christ, it was so hard. But I was fueled by rage. I was fueled by anger that I'd gone through this awful mental health period. I was literally fighting myself because I was like, the good part of me is like, come on, you can go and do this. It will cure you. You'll leave all your demons out there and it will cure you. And suddenly you'll be an ultra runner. Everything will be great. Spoiler alert, that's not what happened. I did leave a lot of demons out on the trail, but then I got back and they all opened my bedroom door in the middle of the night and came in and went, well, that's done. Now what? And I was like, oh my God, now what? And I just fell in, I call it the happiness tax, off a cliff and into the big vat of the happiness tax, which is just no one cares. And that's how it started off at the beginning. But as I've done more and more, there's a lot less of that rage. There's a lot more gratitude that comes in that I can do it. There's a lot more respect for my body. There's a lot more respect for looking after myself outside of running. So eating properly, sleeping properly, doing what Nims Purja calls the basics well. Like if you can do the basics well in life, you'll be okay. And that's eating, drinking enough water, exercising, and working on yourself. But, you know, I think when people are like, I could never do that, that's the story you are telling yourself. That's not true. If you separate the fact from the fiction, where's your evidence that you could never do that? Did you try and do it once and fail? No. Have you done anything like it before and failed? No. So why can you never do it? It's absolute fallacy. And that's the stuff that I've really learned over the last, you know, from being sober, basically. I got sober 10 months ago and it's really made me very, very razor sharp. It's very painful because you have to feel feelings. You can't just drink feelings away. But, you know, it's these stories we tell ourselves. And when people say, oh man, I could never run a marathon, I literally want to run to their house, open their door, give them a massive cuddle and be like, of course you can run a marathon. Like, let's talk about your life. Most of these people, and a lot of them are women, have had children. The ultimate endurance event, having a child, then forgetting about pain, that makes you a better endurance runner. Then they've raised those children. And for 3 or 4 years, maybe longer, the ultimate endurance event, lack of sleep, you have to keep going. You have no option. You cannot stop. You have to look after yourself. It's the same thing, but just in a different lane. And I don't have children. So, and I purposely chose not to because of my mental health, because I was like, I just can't give this to anyone else. I don't want to put this on anyone else. So when I look at people that have had kids or people that, you know, have these real high flying jobs and like really intense lives, I think that they're heroes. I've got a client who's got a daughter who is profoundly disabled to the point where she needs 24-hour day care, but she is training to run 100K.
Wow.
And she's like, I'm such a bad runner. I don't, you know, I'm not very good at it. And I'm like, oh my God, the work you do at home that goes completely unnoticed is more than this. Like everyone does more. People think running a marathon is painful because that's the story they've seen on the TV or the story they've read in a magazine or the story that they've seen in Runner's World. But that life is painful, man. Life is an endurance event. Running can really show you physically in a short space of time what you're capable of. It gives you a direct result. But in life, you never get that direct result because you're constantly striving for the next thing. Whereas running marathons, running ultras, there's a start, there's a middle, there's an end. And if you can frame your mind properly, you can get to that end like you do through life. Like most people will get to the end. But in trying to get to the end, they're constantly trying to achieve something else. Going out and running 100 miles when you get to the end of 100 or 50 miles or 13 miles, whatever it is, that's validation, immediate validation. You get a medal and everybody thinks, oh, that's lovely. Or, do you know what? In my world, no one thinks that because no one cares anymore because everyone's off doing more and more and more stuff. And that's another trap you fall into is, oh my God, I might have run 400 milers this year, but I haven't run this that so-and-so's done. It's like, you know, comparing yourself and all that sort of stuff. And that's another conversation for another time. And so I have suffered with in the past, but I just think anyone listening to this is like, I can't identify with it. There's no way I could do that. Take a look at what you've achieved in your life and then come back to me.
Yeah. Is that what you mean by big energy. I know you've talked about that, and that we all have it. We can all access it. Is that what you mean by big energy? The fact that we're all doing, achieving these things in our lives, and that can actually translate across into running.
Yeah, and it absolutely can translate across in running. It's not really about, there's big energy, but then there's also the most important thing is the stories that you're telling yourself. Because the stories that you're telling yourself, most people will tell themselves, aren't true. If you separate the facts, if you literally get a bit of paper, write down the story, and then do 2 columns and put fact at the top, fiction at the top of one, fiction at the top of the other. Write down the actual facts that in a court of law could be proved. And there'll be very few of them. The rest of it is fiction. And it's more than like the big energy. It's more like self-understanding, I think, or even just realizing that maybe the things that you've believed in the past about yourself aren't actually the things that are facts. Like I might not think I'm good enough to be a partner to someone, or I might not think I'm good enough to do this, that, or the other. But when I write down that story as to why, none of it is based in fact. It's all based in thought. Thoughts are not facts. Thoughts are stories.
It's having that objectivity and being able to kind of zoom out and see things with that bigger perspective. And it sounds like running really helped you to do that. So, and that's amazing.
It gives you thought time, man, that you don't have anywhere else. Go out on a trail for 4 hours on your own with no headphones, and you have to get from A to B and you can't get out. No one's going to pick you up. If you don't run, you have to walk. So then, and have a think, go and try it without your phone, without anything, because you will find it extremely hard.
You don't listen to music or podcasts or...
I always take my headphones, and when I first started running I couldn't go out without them in case there's an emergency situation. That emergency situation is I'm bored, because it does get boring if you're in 100 miler and you're like, oh man, I've only done 25 miles, got no one to talk to. But that's a decision. If you choose to listen to music because that's what you want to do, choose to listen to music because that's what you want to do. If you choose to have a drink because that's what you want to do, choose to have a drink. It's when you don't choose anymore, when you desperately battle to distract yourself in any way you can. So I purposefully always start a race with no headphones. They're always in my bag for emergencies, but the amount of times I use them now is so rare. It's so rare that I'll get them out. Really rare, because I just like listening to what's going on around me. I run a lot in the countryside, mostly in the countryside, mountains, Peak District, Yorkshire Three Peaks. I run a lot in Wales. I run a lot on the South West Coast Path. Just to be in, it sounds so hippie-ish, but just, it's a privilege to be in the nature like that. It's a privilege to be somewhere you can't hear cars or sirens. It's a privilege to hear that cracking under your feet, and to see things other people don't get to see because they choose to go and exercise in a gym, or they choose to go and exercise in front of their TV, or whatever it is. And people say to me, what's all right for you? You're a running coach. You get to do this all the time. If you want to go out running outside, make a choice and make it a priority and put it into your diary and go and do it. Everyone has a choice. So the benefits of it from being outside are so huge that now I'm like, I either start having a chat with someone on the trail, or if they don't want to talk to me, I will just take in the majesty of where I am, because I find that incredibly comforting and inspiring and wonderful. I am proper hippie now. Like if I take my clients out, sometimes I make them stop in the middle of a run. I'm like, oh my God, look at this field. And they're like, what? I'm like, look at it. Like last week, the grade of grass was 2 centimeters. Now they're 6. Isn't that amazing? And people are like, are you drunk? And I'm like, no, look at it.
But it's like the ultimate exercise in presence, isn't it? Like you're actually fully present. Like you're noticing the grass, you're noticing your feelings, you're noticing that you have these difficult feelings. You're fully faced with yourself, and you're there, and you have to be there. You have to breathe, like you said. You have to focus on your breath. You have to put one step in front of the other. And I think that's what makes it such an incredible experience, actually. I think that's it. It's that bringing you into presence. And Yeah, I'm running without.
And that presence thing, that's really important, because a lot of people believe that when they're present with themselves, they will be calm and happy, like they're meditating. But when you are present with yourself properly, the first, I'd say few times, but if I'm really present with myself, I find it excruciatingly painful, because there are thoughts and feelings that you cannot get rid of a thought, and a feeling comes from a thought. You cannot get rid of a thought. It's impossible. It's like that whole, don't think of an elephant. You cannot get rid of it. So you have to be curious with it and be like, that's a really interesting thought. I'm thinking that I'm not good enough, or I'm thinking I'm a terrible person, or I'm thinking I'm going to be alone together. 3 of my top favorite things to think about myself. But I'm like, that's really interesting. Instead of now going, oh my God, think about something else. Think about what you're going to do at the weekend, or listen to music. I'm like, that's really interesting. I wonder where that's come from. Where can that have come from? Is it because of this? Is it because, and you are present in your own thoughts, and you're running along just taking them to pieces, and it dissipates. The feeling dissipates. It's just temporary. And the more you do it, it's like those thoughts get afraid of being there, because they know they're going to get found out. Thoughts can be liars. And if a liar is called out, it will back off. It's like, well, you're being called out. Stop. It's that presence.
You're watching. I mean, it's like people have this idea. The way you describe running is a lot like the way meditators describe meditating. It's not that you don't have thoughts. It's actually that you notice thoughts. You see them come and you notice them, and then you can start to gain perspective and curiosity around those thoughts, rather than believing them and being attacked. You can have that distance. So amazing that it's had that impact on you, and I'm sure it does for many people. That's why I think it's such a particular type of physical activity. I think the distances really help, and I think also just the kind of the way that it feels in your body, because there's a rhythm to it, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And then you say the way it feels in your body, but I'm telling you this for nothing, Yvonne, it can be so painful. And there is so much awful stuff that goes along with it, like being sick and all the other things that happen to your body, aching, being hallucinating. That's always a good one. I love a good hallucination. But it's living, it's presence. It's like, woohoo, I'm hallucinating in the middle of the night. I've not taken any drugs and I'm not drunk. Like, it's living, it's being present.
And I love that you are explaining all of this to us, because as someone who's never even attempted a marathon, let alone an ultra marathon, it's wonderful to hear how excruciatingly difficult it is. Because like you said, people have this idea that you only do it because it's easy. And I think it's really important to understand that, it's in the really difficult stuff. That's where we grow. It's
absolutely
in those moments where we just don't think that we can do it, and it's painful.
It's almost like curiosity about fear, because people are scared. They're scared they're going to fail, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with failing. Nothing. Failure is brilliant. It's how we all learn to walk. It's how we learn not to eat glass. It's how we learn how to not fall over. Like, failure is brilliant. Like, I learned from my not finishing the Arc of Attrition. That wasn't failure. That was the best recce of all time. I've done 75 miles of it. I know exactly what's going to happen next year. Next year I'll go back and I'll do the best I can again to finish it. Like, it's that real curiosity about the fear, and the myths around ultra running just drive me mad. Like, the myths around training fit, the myths around what you have to do, the myths around this, that, and the other. But all the snippets you're getting off social media about how to be an ultra runner are literally the tips of icebergs. There's very few people that will say it like it is, and anyone can give it a go. You just need to prioritize it in your life. And when in prioritizing it, you're not missing out on anything. You're not missing out on time with your family or time at work. You're giving yourself really important time. It's a meeting with yourself when you go out for a training run. And a training run an ultra training run is a very slow job, and learning how to eat a load of sandwiches. Like, a lot of people say ultras are just eating competitions with running thrown in. 100% true. How much can you eat? But, there is pain, and there is stuff that goes wrong, and there is, like anything, like life, there is pain, there is stuff that goes wrong, there is stuff that you think, do you know what, I'm not going to do that again. And then there are days where it works out so well for you. But, what there isn't in ultra running is the distraction. There is you choose whether or not you want to come face to face with yourself and strip yourself down to absolutely zero, like zero, and look at yourself and go, right, this is really interesting. And I'm coming out the other end of it now where I'm like, I actually quite like you, Ali. You're all right, which is a revelation, because I used to be like, I would rather be anyone but me. But running has bought me the time to understand that most of the stuff I've told myself is not true.
Well,
and that's amazing.
Amazing that you've had that experience through it. The myths that you just mentioned around endurance running, I wonder if you can sort of tell us what some of those are, because you started to really connect with people on social media before you started coaching runners. And I saw that people were asking lots of questions, messaging you. I'm wondering, what kind of things were they asking you? Were they asking you about these myths around ultra running, or was it just other?
Most of them are women who tell me they're not good enough. I'd love to do this, but I'm not good enough. I'd love to do this, but I don't have time. That's the other one. I don't have time. You've got as much time as every single other human in the world. But there's two definites with humans. One, we will all die. Two, we will have 24 hours in the day. Everyone's got the same amount of time. It's up to you how you use that time, right? People think that to train for an ultra or even to train for a marathon, you need to be running like 20 hours a week. You don't. You need 2 or 3 hours a week, maybe 4 hours a week to get marathon fit, 5 or 6 towards the latter stages. For an ultra, you can get it done in 10, 15 hours a week, which really, when you look at how much time you spend on Instagram, on your phone, go in your screen time and look at how many hours you spend on that. You can take half of that away and then you're already doing it. And how much time you spend procrastinating or like worrying about the fact that you wish you could do a marathon, but you can't. So it's a lot of women telling me this story about they don't think that they're good enough, or what can I do? Or another classic, my husband or my partner has told me they don't think I can do it. And I'm like, if your partner, husband, friend is telling you can't do it, that's because they can't do it. Because people often say that. It's like, you hold a mirror up, like, I'm going to run a marathon. You hold a mirror up and people go, oh my God, I could never do that. Like, you won't be able to do that. And it's like, what you mean is you can't do that. I can. And your opinion is none of my business. It's your opinion of yourself. So I often say that to them. But then there's the stuff like, what will I eat? Like, where do I go to the toilet? Like, won't my legs fall off? Where do I sleep? And I'm like, well, you don't go to sleep because, hey man, like most of us have spent time in our teenage years having 2 hours sleep and then go to work, right? That's endurance. Like a lot of people have had children and have gone through a year of broken sleep. That's endurance. Like, what do I eat? You eat what you normally eat. Like, if you're going out to run all day, you have your breakfast, you start running, you have a snack, and then lunchtime comes. So you have a sandwich or a packet of crisps or a sandwich and a packet of crisps and a biscuit. And then you keep running till snack time. And then you have your dinner. And if you're running 100 miles, you just do that like you would normally. It's what you learn to eat and run. I can't run after eating. It says in Runner's World, you have to wait an hour. But I've eaten a whole pizza while running along and nothing bad has happened to me. So, if you're sick running a marathon or sick running an ultra, it's usually because you've been running too fast. And it's usually because you've eaten too much fiber or you've eaten something that doesn't agree with you. So like anything, you have to test the stuff. You have to, work out what you're going to eat, what you like eating, how to eat, how much water to drink. There's all those bits, but that's fun. That's just a fun way. You don't, when you get your first bike, you don't get your first bike's on an £8,000 road bike, isn't it? It's a bike with stabilizers and you learn and eventually they come off. And it's exactly the same thing. And I think people see images on social media of runners, especially women or men, ripped, tiny, calves, that's not what ultra runners look like. Go to an ultra and you'll see people from all walks of life, all shapes and sizes, all incredible athletes. Like the word athlete describes anyone that is willing to stand at the start line of an event, not a race, an event. And so, yeah, I did write a blog actually about the social media lie, about how it puts people off doing this stuff. It's, as always, social media is the tiniest, it's 1% of the reality of what is going on with people. And 1% of the sexy bit of ultra running. Everybody's running up mountains in Chamonix. No, some people are running loops around a cider farm in Somerset, but they're still having the same good time as the guys in Chamonix. Better time, because they're not racing up 9,000 feet of elevation. So I just wish that I could change. I wish I could do a Joe Wicks on people and say, look, just come to one ultra event, one lapped ultra event, have a go, do one lap, like a 4-mile lap, and then maybe do another one a bit later, or walk it. You can walk a bit if you want. You don't have to run the whole time. Like, because it just gives people, the exercise is obviously scientifically proven to raise your serotonin levels, but it makes you proud of yourself, man. It does. Once you get over that I hate myself bit, you can feel really, really proud of yourself by doing stuff like this. You can meet amazing new people, and you meet people that change your life. Like, my clients inspire me every day. Like, all of them inspire me every day. They're so dedicated to what they're doing, and they're having a great time while they're doing it. So, and they're learning loads of stuff about themselves, which makes me really happy. So yeah, if anyone's listening to this thinking, oh, maybe, like, go and find a crew of people that are doing it who are lovely, and go and join in. Go and join in with the cool kids in the playground.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like the actual coaching side of things has really sort of given you a huge amount of fulfillment, just as much as the amount of fulfillment you get from running. Like, can you talk a bit about that? What is it about working with people and helping them to achieve their goals that, you know, really feels good?
The first thing I'll say about this is I play a very minute part in people's goals, because ultimately, okay, so there's this amazing saying, a recovery saying. It's there's a book called We're the Luckiest by Laura McEwen, like one of my favorite sober books. And in it, she says, you cannot do this alone, but only you can do this. And that is what I say to my clients. Like, you can't do it alone, because you need support. You need support. You might need support from a coach, you might not. You need support from your family, your crew, your people who love you, to be like, you've got this. I believe in you. You can do it, but only you can do it. And when I started coaching, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I do know what I'm doing because I've coached myself. And the people that I've taken on, there's like 15 of them. They're from all walks of life. They're men, they're women, they're like dads, mums. Some of them are older, some of them are super young, some have never run an ultra, some are doing their third 100-miler. But every single one of them has shown such fortitude. Like, I just write them a plan and call them every week and chat to them about what's going on in their life. And it's very holistic where I coach. I'm not like, go and do your sprint session, go and do your intervals, go and do this. I'm like, here's how much I want you to run in a week, and here's your long run. Go and tell me what it's like. I go and meet them a lot. I go and run with them a lot. I'll sometimes do events with them. So we get like 12 hours together of just running and chatting, because it's about their life. If they need a coach, something's holding them back, and I don't know what that is. So I have to get right under the skin of them to work out what it is. And a lot of the time it's a story that they've told themselves. And a lot of the time they have got a history of mental health issues, or a history of just real lack of self-care, beating themselves up, comparing themselves to other people all the time. And we just pull that apart. And I put them in contact with groups. Like, I have a Facebook group called Ultra Awesome, which is amazing. If anyone's interested in ultras, go in there and ask any question, because there is no such thing as a stupid question. I put them into groups like that, groups like Bad Boy Running. I get them to listen to podcasts. I get them to come to the running show, and I get them to meet real people who are lovely, so they can go, oh yeah, that guy's just like me, but he just ran 250 miles around the Thames Ring. Like, when you recognize yourself in a group of people, it's like a festival. You go to a festival and you recognize yourself in all those people, because you all share the same love. And it's the same with running. If you feel like you're part of a community and you feel supported, you're empowered to really give it a go. You get good advice. You get no judgment, because that's the other thing. There should be no judgment in running. Anyone that has run, anyone that's actually put on a pair of trainers and a pair of shorts and gone out for a run is a runner. The end. Doesn't matter if you walk a bit, doesn't matter if you've never done a marathon or 10K or 5K, you are a runner. If you run 1 mile a day, then you are a runner. And people need to understand that. But there's so much, you should do it like this, you should do it like that. And the reason that I started coaching was because I saw that, and it pissed me off to the point where I'm like, this is putting people off achieving incredible things and finding out how much more they've got in them, and spending that really invaluable time with themselves. Is putting them off because they think they've got to run fast. It's bad for your knees. It's this, it's that. It's not. You don't have to run fast. You can walk. Most ultra runners walk. And that's where I started doing the coaching. And the results I've seen and it's all their work. It's nothing to do with me. I've just steered them onto the path here and there. It's incredible. Like, just incredible to see these, even when they fail, they get back up. And I'm like, it's their perception of failure. I'm like, every time you step onto a race, onto an event start line, that's winning. It doesn't matter if you don't complete it. It's your story. It's your journey. Do it your way. It doesn't matter. And they just, whereas before they would have been like, oh, this is awful. They bounce back up because they're like, I know. I've done this reading. I've done my homework. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And it's just, I think if I can have an effect on just one person with this podcast, if just one person, it's like, I'm going to join the Ultra Awesome Facebook group, or I'm going to go out for a run, or I'm going to go to my local park run and just walk it to see if I like the route. That's all I need to do. Literally all I need to do, because I wish I'd had that when I found ultra running, because I spent a lot of time beating myself up and procrastinating and being like, I don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing. And it was only when I met the trail running community and went to more and more events that I started to go, oh, actually, I can do whatever I want. And that's the best thing about ultra running. Pretty much do whatever you want. It's great. So yeah, I love my coaching. I love my clients. It's great.
Well, it sounds like you've definitely found something where you're really connecting to people. You're really making a massive difference in their lives, and you're understanding that what's going on underneath are these difficult feelings that are actually holding people back, and wonderful that you can support them in that way. It's really interesting the way you talked about comparison there in relation to running. I would imagine it's quite hard to get away from that, because, there's this thing of times and what's your time, and, looking at other people's, bodies, and like you said, but then you'll bring it back to this idea that it's about drawing from your inner resources and actually learning about yourself. So it's not about the comparison culture. Do you find that it's been difficult for you to see your way through that? Is it a very pervasive kind of energy in running, or have you not found it to be?
I find comparison, when I first started, I would compare myself to everybody, including people I haven't met or had never met. So I'd look at the Insta famous runners and compare my weekly mileage or my monthly mileage to theirs, which is so ridiculous, or my speed to theirs. I don't know who they are, or where they run, or how long they've been running, or what they're aiming for. Are they trying to get a personal best for 10K, or are they trying to run 100 miles? I don't know. So what's the point in comparing myself to them? But I did it, and it made me feel awful. And as time's gone on, I have found my little running niche. And that running niche was basically come off Instagram, which is I've always been absolutely honest about how I feel mentally on the internet, because I think it's really important to go, do you know what? You're never cured. Get that in your head. If you've got mental illness, you'll never be cured, but you will be able to deal with it a lot better. And I live with my depression quite happily. Me and him live together okay. He's always there, but some days he'll pipe up and I'm like, oh, go on then. Say your piece, buddy. Go on. And sometimes he's there all day, like really going for it. And I'm like, that's interesting. Where's that come from? We have to have these big sit downs, me and depression. And we do on the sofa in the living room and have a big old, I'd say chat, but he talks to me and I just listen and go, okay.
That's brilliant. I love that you have that objectivity and you see it. Yeah,
because he's there. He's there. He's actually not in today because I don't know where he is, but I know that he's going to be coming around the weekend before I do this big event, because he always does, but he's not actually in at the moment. So, but that's how I see it. Like, and some nights I'm like, oh God, he's brought his mate anxiety with him, and they sit on my sofa and they just sit there and I let them, and I don't try and push them out. But the point is, I've always been on Instagram. I've always been, this is how I feel, 100% how I feel. I'm not doing it for sympathy, and I'm not doing it because I want saving. I'm telling you, this is how I feel, because I do. Whereas a lot of people are like, sunshine, lollipops. Oh my God, I'm training for a PB. Oh my God, I'm doing this. Hey, have you tried this new supplement? They really are. Or, yeah, I'm just a normal girl who's like living a best life. And it's like, are you living your best life? No. If you were living your best life, you wouldn't be telling Instagram. You'd be being present in your best life. Like, I've always tried to be honest. I put up runs, me and Pickle run every other day or whatever. So I just put up little bits of me and Pickle running around because I know it gets people to go, Allie's out for a run, I'll go out for a run. But I also put up, I feel awful. I've thought about killing myself 3 times this week. And people are like, what? And I'm like, because I have. And because people do. I'm not saying I'm going to do it, but I'm explaining that people do. And that helps just like pull the stigma away. But to be quite honest, Yvonne, I don't know anyone else that does that. And I think that when it comes to comparing myself to other people, I don't anymore because there's no point. Because I'm not there to be a famous influencer. I'm there to say to people, if you're a bit wonky in the brain, or if you feel like you're not good enough, or if you suffer a little bit with these problems, I do as well, 100%. And I'm not better, but I'm really trying. And you can really try as well. And I can tell you some stuff that works for me, and I can send you some funny dog videos. And if you're inspired by me and Pickle having a row about which direction to go in because there's a deer over there and a pheasant over there, then that's great. Like, I just want to, I don't want to be quick. I don't want to have FKTs. I do want to win a couple of races because I like the big trophies. So there's a couple I'm like, I'd like to win that. But that's a competition for me.
Tiny bit.
The competition for me to get hold of that trophy that I want. And it's not going to happen this year or next year. It might happen the year after. So like the Dragon's Back race, which I'm entered into in September, I have no idea if I can finish that. I'm terrified of it. But there would have been a time where I've been like, I'm going to fail and everyone's going to look at me and go, she's a failure. She's not a real ultra runner. I don't even know what a real ultra runner is. But now I'm like, well, I'll give it my absolute best. But if I don't, then that's a story as well. And that's the adventure as well. It's just all a big adventure, isn't it?
Definitely. And oh my gosh, I love the authenticity that you're talking about. I love that willingness to fully show up as you. I think that's what really inspires people. I think it's so healing. And I think it's about having a connection to your deeper, truer sense of who you really are. And there's a lot of fear in people about showing up because they're afraid of what other people think of them. They're afraid that if I really say, I'm thinking this, I'm feeling this, I'm having a bad day, well, maybe they're not. So, and then that's where the comparison comes back. But if you can keep being authentic and honest and real, I think it is contagious. I think other people are encouraged to also show up in that way. And I think that is incredibly healing. I think that's what we need. That's what we need to see on Instagram. We need to see it everywhere as much as we can. But
I think you're totally right, because people are still very, very scared of admitting there is anything wrong.
Yeah.
Very scared. They're scared they're going to lose their jobs. They're scared they're going to be labelled liability. They're scared that people will think that they're wonky forever. And it's like, the thing is, everyone's a bit wonky now. Everybody is.
Yes,
everyone suffers from like negative bias. Everybody has the motivational triad firing on all cylinders, telling us that to be scared of everything. Everyone does. It's human nature. And I think it's worse to pretend. But, there's a lot of stuff about the stigma of mental health having gone away, in inverted commas. It absolutely has not gone away at all. And it might be okay to say to someone at work, I feel a bit down or I feel a bit depressed, but it is absolutely not okay to say, last week I was at the park with my 3 kids and I actually felt like throwing myself in front of a lorry as it came through the park. People be like, oh my God, you're insane. Take the kids away. Call the men in white coats.
Yeah.
But that's absolutely normal. And talking about it is so important. If we can talk about it, it won't happen. And that's one of the things that really gets me. And I've been told it by people before. They've said to me, maybe tone it down a bit, because it's not socially acceptable to talk about suicidal ideation on social media. And I'm like, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to the fact that there's still, amazingly, there's still this idea of the perfect person, like that everyone's trying to be. So, this sense that there is a person who doesn't have any hang-ups and doesn't have any difficult thoughts and feelings and finds life just so easy. that person, I want to be that person. And that is the myth. That isn't actually true. That doesn't exist. And until we all really get it, that the princess in the Disney movie is just, it's just a character.
It's a princess in a Disney movie.
There's no truth in that. You know, once we get that there isn't something that we should be trying to be, and if we don't pretend that we're that, there's something wrong with us. Until we get that, then these feelings, I think, are just gonna remain. These feelings of.
But it doesn't. And the thing is, it doesn't mean you have to be sad all the time. I think people are like, oh, but that means I'll never be happy. It's like, no, you don't have to be sad all the time, because you're not sad all the time, because there's an acceptance. There is an acceptance that, you know what? It is hard being a human, especially nowadays where we have comparison thrown at us left, right, and centre. There's screens on everywhere. There's screens everywhere. There's screens in our cars, and there's screens in our bedrooms, and there's screens everywhere. So the ability to compare now is a billion times more than it ever was. And I think it doesn't mean that you need to be sad about, I will never be a Disney princess character and everything is fucking sparkling and brilliant and amazing. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is acceptance of being present and being grateful and having gratitude for all the stuff that is brilliant and is simple. Like, you know, I wrote this in a blog the other day. I woke up the other morning and I looked over at my wall, and I've got a peace lily, and I've got a very, very blue wall. It's like an aqua green wall, and the light was coming in through the curtains, hitting the peace lily and bouncing off the wall. And I went, oh my God, that is so beautiful. And then I went, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? You're turning into your sister. You're turning into somebody that's a hippie and likes crystals. I do like crystals. I have lots of them. I do sage my house. But I'm like, because it was such an authentic, nice feeling, but it's one I'm not comfortable with. And I took a moment and just went, that's so nice to think that first thing, Ali. And then there's Pickle's face and her little yawny nose and her little soft ears. And I'm like, it's okay to be content with this. But I think we spend so long being discontent and looking for problems with ourselves and the negative bias of being a human being, which is to see the negative in most stuff because we're trying to protect ourselves as a species. It's okay to just be content for a bit. And that comes with being present.
Yeah.
It really comes with being present. No one ever got content from scrolling through Instagram, ever. No, but you don't say to someone, what's the happiest moment of your day? And they went, oh, do you know what? It was when I was scrolling through Instagram. Because it wasn't.
It's so true.
It's probably the unhappiest moment of your day. Maybe it could be the happiest moment of your day is going for a walk or a little jog and seeing that the field behind your house has got buttercups up now. Maybe that can be it. It can be that simple. The presence, being present, saying to yourself, I'm going to go take some time out for me. And ultra running is one of the best ways to do that. It will change your life. It really will. It will just buy you this time where you can make decisions about other stuff and where you can be fully present. It's amazing.
It sounds it. The way you describe it sounds it. You're even making me feel tempted.
I'm renowned for this. And the thing that I get told the most when I'm at races, people will run past me and just shout at me, this is your fault. They'll go again. And I'm like, brilliant. Cool.
So, Ali, we're coming towards the end of the interview now, and there's a question that I always ask at the end, because the idea behind the Tenderness Revolution is having this quality of tenderness for ourselves and others, and it's through the 3 C's, because they enable us to fully see the truth, and they are courage, curiosity, and compassion. And I had to ask you, if you had to choose one of these qualities that really means the most to you in your life, which would you choose and why? And I know it's really hard.
Probably curiosity. Because that's at the moment, at this time in my life, it's the curiosity, because it's the changing the way I think personally from you are the most awful person on earth, Ali, and you will never win at anything. 2, that's an interesting thought. Why do you think that? And I've used this curiosity thing for the last 6 or 7 months to stop this my mate depression in his tracks. And instead of going, here he is, tell me this, oh my God, I'm going to have a drink, or oh my God, I'm going to go distract myself with a run, or oh my God, I'm like, oh, hello, come and sit down. That's really interesting. Why do you think that? And just been really curious with everything that I feel, even when I'm running and I'm like, wow, I don't feel great. My stomach feels like it's going. And it's like, that's really interesting. Why would your stomach be going? Is it because you didn't have any breakfast, or is it because you ate the wrong thing for breakfast? What could you do to make it better? And I think, so for me, that curiosity really is a massive superpower in helping me to deal with that depression and anxiety part of me that will never go away, that I have completely accepted is part of who I am, but doesn't need to dictate my life and doesn't need to dictate how I feel all the time. And that doesn't mean it will shrink into nothing. And it doesn't mean I won't spend nights on my sofa with Pickle where I have a good old cry while depression sits there on my shoulder, because that's okay as well, because I'm listening to him and he deserves a bit of respect. He's got a lot to say. Doesn't mean I have to believe him. So the curiosity thing for me is really, really important. And I say it to people a lot, especially when they say things to me like, oh man, I did terrible in that race at the weekend. And I'll literally say, that's really interesting. Why would you say that? And it floors people. They're like, what? Because I did. It's like, no, it's really interesting you saw it that way, because I didn't see it that way. And it really makes people go, hang on a minute, the story I'm telling myself isn't true. It's absolute rubbish. So yeah, that's the long answer to that short question.
I love the way you described curiosity there. It's that, that questioning and being unwilling to just, firstly accept these stories that we all have. And also it's kind of like almost seeing the magic in things and constantly being sort of woken up by your surroundings, and it sounds like it's really infectious. You're bringing that into other people's lives too, and you're making a difference.
I hope so, because sometimes I just feel like I rant on and on and on. I rant into a void. It makes me feel better at the end of the day, Fon. So well, I'm looking after myself as well.
You're doing great things. You're doing great things for yourself and for others. And wow, I think you're amazing. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I've really enjoyed our conversation and I've learned so much.
Good. Off you go. Sign up for that first ultra.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Tenderness Revolution. I hope you come back for more, because my aim with this podcast is to help us become more aware of these moments of kindness and compassion and how they shape our lives, and enable us to feel more connected to the world around us.